After witnessing a lack of opportunities for disabled actors, Mark Beer took matters into his own hands and set up a production company. Well, Mark has second-degree cerebral palsy and has worked as an actor for more than 30 years. Well, he's now producing, directing and starring in Alan Bennett's Talking Heads at the Chelsea Theatre this week and preparing to perform A Christmas Carol at the Actors' Church in Covent Garden next month. Well, he's been telling Alicia all about it.
We are doing 2 monologues. I'm playing Graham Whittaker from a monologue called Chip and the Sugar, and my lovely co-star Kathy is playing Leslie from Her Big Chance, and each of us probably are on stage for about 40-45 minutes and there's nobody else. So it is a big responsibility when you kind of take it all on board. And of course, he writes so beautifully that you have to develop and create all the different voices for each character. It's very much like, similar to the original Shirley Valentine, you know, which was a monologue by Willie Russell. Similar thing. But they're quite of their time. They were originally shown in '86 as part of a series on the BBC, and I think they've been done occasionally on stage, but certainly not recently. And this is the only time, I believe, that 2 disabled performers have actually taken on the roles.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge amount of, you know, lines and scripts to be taking on, and a big job. But not only that, you've also actually been put on the whole show yourself. You're producing, directing.
Yes.
What made you decide that this was what you wanted to produce?
I think it was basically because I wanted something that was going to be poignant. I wanted something that people could relate to. I wanted something that was going to be thought-provoking, but also very funny. They're both incredibly funny. We're coming through a very difficult time in life at the moment. We're coming out of the COVID. People are going through the credit crunch or the financial difficulties, and that's why I've deliberately kept the tickets to £5 each, because I wanted to open the doors to as many people as possible, and that's why. Really?
Yeah, widening that accessibility even more. You decided to make your own production company, take matters into your own hands in lockdown. What kind of led you to do that?
A number of things, really. I've been a professional actor for 38 years now, and I have worked every single year of my professional life, either on telly, film or radio or whatever. But I'd audition for the RSC and I'd audition for big companies, and I'd be knocking at the BBC a lot, because I worked a lot there when I was younger. And I thought, hang on a minute, there's only so many times you can knock on the door. And if you really want to make a change, you have to do it yourself. So that's why I did it.
You speak about wanting to make that change. From your experience of even just going to auditions, how accessible are those opportunities?
They are there, but whether they will actually take the final leap to employ someone, that's another point.
Yeah.
So in other words, I think they're going through the ticking of the box exercises, but whether they actually will give that person with a disability the opportunity is still very few and far between. And I've been incredibly fortunate to have had a career that has been as busy. And I realised that when I started, there were hardly any disabled actors at all. But now there are far more, but they're certainly not with a lot of experience. And then there are a few with lots of experience because they keep working all the time. And the balance is not balanced, if you know what I mean. And we're still at the stage where we need to cast people with disabilities regardless of their disability. We need to cast them because they can act and they can do a job. And the characters that they are given are not focused completely on just what they look like. And a few actors and actresses now are beginning to do that. And that was the purpose of doing this show, really, was because it isn't written for a disabled person to play, but there's absolutely no reason why it can't be.
Absolutely. Well, you've got more coming up next month now. You're doing Christmas Carol, aren't you?
Yes.
What can we expect from that show?
That is in a collaboration with a company called the Black Dog Corporation, and it focuses on people with more emotional and mental difficulties, and especially coming out of COVID, that's been a real impact on people, how they were more isolated and having to stay at home more. And so this is a collaboration with that company and my company, Dharmakot Productions, and is going to open at the Actors Church in Covent Garden, and it will be there from the 23rd to the 26th of November.
Well, there you have it. Alan Bennett's Talking Heads is opening at the Chelsea Theatre tomorrow.
Arise, sir, Mr. Worthing. From the son of the Cumberland posture, it is most indecorous.
Mamma, please! I must ask you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
I beg your pardon. You are not engaged to anyone. And when you do become engaged, I or your father, his health permitting, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, whichever the case may be. It is hardly something that she should be allowed to decide for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I make these inquiries, Gwendolen, you will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
The carriage, Gwendolen!
Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Cotswolds.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Why did you choose this particular play to direct and work on?
It's always been one of my favourites. It's always been something that I've thought about doing for a very long time. I studied it when I was at the Star Centre in Gloucester. I performed it as part of my experience at the Literature Festival there and played Jack. And so it's something I've had in my mind for a very long time, really.
What is it like working on such a classic as Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest?
It's very tricky because he's very verbal, and it's all about the words, it's all about the breathing, it's all about the delivery of the line, and it's all about finding the pauses and finding the gaps when you need to breathe. So there's actually a massive technique in order to deliver massive long pieces of dialogue, which obviously you only discover once you're up and running.
I've been bound to tell you, Mr. Worthing, that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. It is the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We worked together on it, in fact. But, however, I am quite willing to enter your name should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit, I do smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. Men should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is.
Have you had to make any alterations in the script so you could play Lady Bracknell with your disability?
Yes, I mean, it's hilariously funny having someone play her with a disability, because there's a big speech at the beginning of her entrance where she talks constantly about being ill or being an invalid or invalid, as she puts it, and she's terribly patronising about the whole issue of disability. So it's kind of ironic, really, and adds another level of comedy.
How has the process been, directing and acting at the same time?
I would say it's been very hard, having to wear two heads at the same time. And a lot of the time, I was really conscious of doing many things all at the same time. And it isn't really until the last week where we are now that I'm actually beginning to think of myself as an actor and not a director. So I'll be very happy once we're up and running and I don't have to think about a million things to do.
I understand you've opened your own production company during the pandemic.
I have. It's called Dramacock Productions, which is the Gaelic word for drama. And I set it up as a result of people saying to me for a long, long time, you should either open your own agency or you should open your own production company. And I decided the production company was the way forward. To consciously make an effort of employing both disabled and able-bodied actors working together, so it will be a completely integrated company on every project, which I'm very excited about.
You have lots of new exciting productions coming up for the rest of the year. Can you tell us about them?
I do. After this, I'm going in to production of Talking Heads by Alan Bennett, playing Graham Whittaker as in Chip in the Sugar, and that's at the Chelsea Theatre in October. Which I'm directing and also working on. And then I'm not directing A Christmas Carol at the Actors' Church in November in Covent Garden. So I couldn't get any more removed from Lady Bracknell if I tried. And it's been a hell of a challenge the whole year to be going from one character to the next, really. I never thought when I put in the application that it would really happen.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and we wish you all the best of luck with your new production company.
Thank you very much.
How old are you? 32. 32. A very attractive age to be married at. I've always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm so pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like an exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. For if it did, it would probably prove to be very detrimental to the upper classes and lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between £7,000 and £8,000 a year.
In land or investment?
Investments, chiefly.
That is not unsatisfactory. What with the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties extracted after one's death? Land has ceased to be a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position, but prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I do have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't rely on that for my real income. And actually, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones who can make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Oh, no matter. That point could be cleared up afterwards. But you do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with such an unspoiled nature as Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Oh, I do have a house in Belgrave Square, but it's currently let by the year to Lady Bloxham, though I can get it back whenever I like, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham. I don't believe I know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's extremely advanced in years.
Oh, nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number, Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
The fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I don't really have any. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, well, they count as Tories. Well, they dine with us in the evening at any rate. And now, on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
No, I'm afraid I've lost both my parents.
Mr. Worthing, to lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of covers? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I don't really know, Lady Bracknell. You see, I say I lost both my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say it seems both my parents lost me. I was, well, found.
Found?
Yes, old Mr. Thomas Cardew, a kind and charitable man, found me and gave me the name of Worthing. Because he had a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Surrey. It's a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, a large, brown, somewhat capacious handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
And where did this Mr. John or James Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom of Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake of his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. To say I am somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it has handles on it or not, seems to me to display an utmost contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life, which reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. And as for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station, well, it may prove to conceal a social indiscretion before now, and has probably been used for that purpose. But it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognised position in good society.
Well, what do you expect me to do, Lady Bracknell? You know I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make every effort to produce one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't know how you expect me to do that. I can produce the handbag at a moment's notice. It's in my dressing room at home. Surely that should be enough to satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it got to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I, or Lord Bracknell, would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and to form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Hello there, you've joined me today at the dress rehearsal just before one night only performance of Rocky Horror at the Cotswolds, and this time I'm playing the narrator.
King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen, when the snow lay round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was through.
Hello there, I'm here today at the lovely Covent Garden Christmas lights, and the reason why I'm here is because I'm going to be recording an audio version very shortly of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, playing Ebenezer Scrooge for AJ Productions.
Hi Mark, what's it like to take on such an iconic character?
Well, to play Ebenezer Scrooge has always been an ambition of mine. I've auditioned for it several times over the years and always been told that I'm too young for it yet. So to actually play it first of all on audio is a really lovely way around it. and I can concentrate on properly delivering the vocal range of the character rather than what he just looks like.
You've done quite a lot of audio work recently.
Yes, I have. I've been very lucky because while everything was suddenly very quiet, I was able to fall back on my voice. It started off in 2020 with The Matchstick Girl, which is coming out again online in December, and then that will be followed by this production, again by the same production company, and then I did The Signalman by Charles Dickens, an adaptation, and more recently it was Ruptured Duck, the true life story of a disabled young lady. So it's great to be able to have that skill to fall back on when things are quite hard to find work at all.
Have you found it more difficult to work the past 2 years?
Well, I have to say, it has been difficult, obviously, because everything was closed for a good 18 months. Even productions on telly were restricted to just the soaps, and slowly it's coming back to life. I was lucky enough to do an outside production of The Sound of Music in the summer. I was really happy to do a collaboration again with the National Film School, doing Chip in the Sugar by Alan Bennett in 2020. And as I said, I started to do audio work. So it's really lovely to finish off the year with such a interesting and iconic character as Ebenezer Scrooge.
Hello and welcome to the interval of The Sound of Music.
Hello guys, tell us about the Sound of Music production and who you play.
I play Admiral von Schreiber, who is the head of the Austrian Navy.
And I play Rolf, who starts off as a telegram boy and at some point between Act 1 and 2 becomes a radicalised Nazi.
Have you worked for Bonzo production before?
Once before I did a production back in 2019. Last year I think that was, I did Romeo and Juliet. I played Romeo, which is great. Yeah, that was my only experience with it.
I've
And you,
not
Mark?
worked with them before, and having worked on this hill, I'm not sure I'm going to rush back in a hurry. But no, it's been a joy.
How it feels working in this production on this place?
Well, being outside, I've never actually performed outside before. So for me, it was a real learning curve. Apart from the fact that you have to really use your voice very clearly, it's very, you know, I've just got everything crossed, it's not going to rain.
And the setting is absolutely perfect for something like this, Sound of Music.
Yeah.
Being in, because we've got the church, we've got the manor house, we've got the hills, it's perfect setting.
And it looks lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, this isn't your first time working at the National Film School, is it?
No, the first time I worked there was in 2001 in a new film called Two's Company, where I played the brother of a very incestuous relationship. And then I was asked back in 2011 to take part in Shakespeare's Villains, playing Richard III, and more recently, in 2015, I played the lead in Whose Life Is It Anyway, Ken Harrison. And I'm delighted to be back in 2020 to play Graham Whittaker in Chip in the Sugar.
Was it difficult getting into character?
Not really, because Graham is a middle-aged man who is gay and has a very close relationship with his mother, and I am all of those three things. But what was hard for me was maintaining the accent over a long period of time.
Did you or the director deliberately choose not to show your disability?
Not really. I don't think it was a deliberate choice. I think the character is naturally sitting in his armchair in his bedroom telling the story. And it is so beautifully written by Alan Bennett that it's very easy to draw the audience in. Probably it's the worst kind of character I've ever played in my whole life. I've been working professionally for over 34 years now, and I always seem to get cast as the young man that's become hit by a car or paralysed from an accident or whatever, for obvious reasons. And this particular character is probably the least nice person I've ever played, which is why it attracted me, really, because I'd never normally get cast in those roles.
So it must be really fun to explore the darker side of those characters.
It is really lovely. I mean, you know, he is the pinnacle of the whole piece and kind of draws it all to a kind of dramatic end. And he appears in the play to be a victim of the war and a victim of what's happened to him. And as the play unravels, you certainly discover otherwise.
And that's an interesting tale as well, having disabled actor, because like you said, often the disabled person is the victim. You know, they're a nice person who's when in real life people
they're just as complicated as everybody
exactly
else.
And that must be
and it's
nice
lovely to play something with so many different levels.
Do you see more of those roles as an actor now coming out, or are we still some way behind?
We are coming forward. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say in 34 years there's been a massive change. There hasn't been. There hasn't been a massive change. The change is happening slowly, but it is happening. We need to get to the same point with disabled casting as we have become with racial casting. And people are no longer cast just to play the black maid. They're cast because they can act and do a good job. And there's no reason why I can't play a lawyer. There's no reason why I can't play a husband. But obviously, you have to cast within a realistic range. You have to cast. It's no good casting me as a ballet dancer. I could play a ballet dancer who used to dance. I can't play one now. So obviously, it has to have a realism to it, I think. And that's why the beauty of this particular character is that he was able-bodied once upon a time, but when we join him in the play, he's come back from the war injured.
How were you someone who knew an awful lot about the First World War before you entered it, or would you go under a learning process about it?
I knew quite a bit because I'd already done a play earlier in my career, in my 30s, about the very same, about the same subject. So as a result of that, I was kind of semi-prepared. And because it was a brand new play, it's been written by a wonderful writer called Alfie James, and we've got a great cast, a great young, exciting cast. And so because I'd already done the performance before in August at the Albany Theatre in Deptford and then the Arts Theatre in Leicester Square. It's a really nice family. I know people say that a lot, and they sit here and go, oh, I'm really happy, blah, blah, blah. But it's true. We have a really nice family, and it's lovely that it has another life.
London can be a challenging city. Noise, traffic and crowds make it hard to get around, with many obstacles to overcome. But for disabled people, the challenges are even greater, especially when it comes to using public transport and getting access to some venues. This week, we hear from disabled Londoners about their experiences and the many barriers that can often prevent them leading a normal life. Gareth Furby has more.
Mark is an actor, he's disabled, and this is the entrance to a West End venue.
I'm not going to let a flight of stairs stop me from performing in the West End.
This is the only route because there's no disabled access.
It's difficult, but as you can see, it's not impossible.
Mark is due to perform here in a play about the First World War.
Pity? I don't need your pity. I am a general.
He was born with cerebral palsy and has been a professional actor for more than 30 years. But he says it's hard to work in most London theatres because so many are so old with little disabled access, especially backstage.
How much of this can you actually get access to?
Just this level, I think. It wouldn't be possible to work in this space. But this theatre is not alone. It's in many, many London theatres.
Mark says the theatres are improving, but they'd both like a little more to be done. Gareth Furby, BBC London News.
everybody's in the same boat. Everybody has some sort of physical or sensory disability, and they're desperately wanting to get their stories heard, their abilities seen, and to be out there within the media. And what's terribly inspiring is that all of us have come on this journey together, and there is strength in numbers and strength in finding a voice, and we've all done that.
What were the challenges in taking on this role?
Well, there were quite a few, really. Firstly, because of my own disability, which, as you know, is cerebral palsy, my body naturally goes into spasm. And somebody who has been paralysed from the neck down, as Ken was, doesn't move hardly at all. So the challenge was really learning how to be as still as I possibly could, which was tricky at times.
You've played a number of characters recently who have taken their own lives. How do you feel about this as a disabled person?
Well, it's a really difficult question to answer, because obviously as an actor you want to work and you want to take on those dramatic challenges. But it's fair to say that the last few roles I've played have very much been about that subject. In 2013 I was in a stage production playing a young girl with anorexia who wanted to top herself. In 2012 I played a young rugby star in an episode of the BBC soap opera Doctors, who also wanted to top himself, and here we are in 2016 and I've just completed another role, Ken, who wanted to top himself. So the question is really, as an individual, I definitely am against it. I very much enjoy life. I love many aspects of my life. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy. I'm not going to say there aren't challenges. There are very difficult times sometimes. But I don't intend to go anywhere for a very long time yet.
How do you feel the media portrays disabled characters?
I think that the media definitely has disabled characters in two categories. The first being a superhero that's run at the Paralympics, and the second being a tragic victim, which I tend to be cast as a lot, really, which I think is really funny, considering I'm so happy. No, I think that the writers and writing needs to develop, and directors and casting directors need to open their eyes so that disabled characters aren't driven by their illnesses. They're driven by their emotional state of mind. They're driven by like any normal character in any situation.
How have attitudes changed over the years towards disabled roles?
I think attitudes haven't really changed that much. What's changed is that there are more disabled actors on screen now than there was when I was working nearly over 30 years ago. Partly because there are more people to choose from, partly because there's more choice, which is a good thing. There are more disabled actors out there. But as far as the roles are concerned, I don't think they're changed that much. When I was in my 20s, I played a young boy in a BBC drama series who'd become paralysed from a mugging and had to deal with all the angst and anger that went with that character, which was a wonderful role at that time and that age of my life. But going forward, really, I'm still playing quite similar roles on screen. Luckily, and I'm very glad to say, in the theatre and on stage, the roles have been far more varied. But because screen and film and television are very much about what you look like and very much focused on your physical attributes, those roles are something that I've embraced a long time ago to play, because one, it keeps me busy, and two, it keeps me working.
Mark, how did you find the rehearsal process?
Well, to begin with, I found it quite challenging, really. I was playing somebody completely against type. I was playing a young woman. I was playing somebody who was in their early 20s. I was playing somebody who wasn't physically disabled. So it was actually an awful lot to take on board and quite difficult.
What was it like playing a real person?
Most importantly for me, playing somebody who really does exist, especially knowing that she was actually going to see one of the performances today, was that I kind of found as much of the truth of her as I possibly could. That to me was the most important thing, to tell her story as truthfully and as honestly as I possibly could.
And how did you feel working in an integrated company?
I've worked in many integrated companies over the years, but I was really happy in this one, particularly because I was being cast purely as an actor and not as the token disabled person. Because the men in the company were playing women and the women in the company were playing men, you were able to be completely free with your ability to tell the story, and therefore I think the audience were able to think about the words rather than the physicality. So the words sort of shone out, really.
And finally, Mark, how did the audience react to the performance?
I think overall they really got it and they enjoyed it. And what was lovely for me particularly was to meet Ellie, who my character was based on. She came to one of the afternoon performances, which was lovely to meet her. She got quite emotional, quite teary, and later on that day she emailed the company to say that this was possibly one of the most important and wonderful days of her life. Arthur's journey really represents many people's journey in the sense that, you know, he really is the unspoken voice of someone trying to find their voice. And we decided quite early on in rehearsals to make him quite shy and quite timid, and deliberately so. Where's reception? I want to go home! I think one of the hardest things for me as, you know, as Mark, as an actor, was that there were an awful lot of similarities, and there are a lot of similarities to Arthur and myself, in that, yes, I have a voice, yes, I'm employed as an actor.
You're going to have to learn sooner or later that the
I
world
too
doesn't
had
care.
to find my independence, I too had to leave home, I too had to face the bureaucracy that goes with that, really. So an awful lot of especially the big monologues about his early life and about him finding his independence at the end came from my own life experience, really. It makes people laugh, it makes people cry, it makes people think, it challenges their perception, and really it does what it says on the tin. It does all the things we wanted it to do. I mean, this is really stretching a lot of boundaries in many, many areas, really. To do with sexuality, to do with disability, to do with acceptance, really, of all sorts of things, and many, many issues. I was accepted at a number of top drama schools at the age of 16 because of my ability to act, but because of my disability and the inaccessibility of the building, I wasn't able to go. There has to be a time where, you know, the lawyer, the secretary, the husband, the housewife could just happen to have a physical or invisible disability.
What sorts of things have you appeared in?
I've presented a children's programme called Playdays, which is for the BBC. I did a drama series a couple of years ago called Specials, which is about the voluntary police force, in which I played the son of one of the lead characters in that for a year. And I played an able-bodied boy who had become paralysed because of a mugging, and you know, I'm not paralysed.
Now this is a bit of a theme because you're normally in a wheelchair, although you're sitting here on the sofa.
Right. That's right.
And you've been in one all your life. You were born with cerebral palsy.
That's right.
And yet the parts you get are always a young man raging against having to be put into a chair after he's been able-bodied. Do you resent that?
I don't resent it. I get a bit tired of it because I'm not bitter. I hope, you know, I don't come across that way. And I'm very happy with my life. I worry greatly that producers and directors, and particularly writers, only view disabled people in that light.
And it's a very great pleasure to welcome Mark Beer, Simon Redwood in Specials. Great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
At what stage in your life, Mark, did you decide to become an actor?
I think very early on, really. I did a school play at the age of about 7, and
because it was a special school and people were busting, you know, came from all over the place. And it was Christmas time and the snow was really heavy on the ground, so people weren't coming in, so I ended up playing lots of different parts rather than just the one.
And then you knew that not only did you want to be an actor, but that you were very adaptable as well, playing different roles. Now, the director of specials, Chris Hodson, has said publicly that he wanted you for the role of Simon, not because you are disabled, but because you're a good actor. But how much of a challenge is it playing someone with a different disability to your own?
It's very hard. I mean, I think the hardest thing about playing the character was the fact that he was very angry and very bitter, because he was obviously not born with a disability, and he became disabled because of a mugging in the series. And I went through 3 auditions for the part, and each time Chris kept saying to me, "Mark, are you sure you can be bitter and angry?" Because I came in beaming with a smile, and they weren't totally convinced.
How did you become bitter and angry then? How did you find that?
Well, it's not. I wouldn't say bitter. I obviously became bitter because of the thought processes and the things that I had to think about. Were just, there are so many unpractical things which I have to deal with, in the sense that there are so many buildings inaccessible, there are so many negative attitudes towards someone with a disability that I live with on a day-to-day basis, that very often I just kind of put in the background. I had to bring those forward and think about them, which wasn't very easy really. But
Not easy, not pleasant, but
no,
it got you to that level, I suppose, of anger for
It got the
Simon.
emotion that was necessary.
We've got masses of questions here, and the first one is from Jackie.
Did you find it hard getting a job because you're a disabled actor?
It was initially, yes. I think because there's a lot of fear to do with disability. It's the fear of the unknown. And until people know somebody with a disability or have worked with somebody with a disability, those barriers don't break down. But unless the work unless I have worked, like the series and like presenting or whatever I do, those barriers aren't going to break down.
Do you see the barriers coming down?
Very, very slowly, but they are. I'm glad to say, happening now.
Edward's got a question.
Did you have any problems with any of the scenes in specials?
I was thinking about this, yes, before I came, and the main problem, really, was the fact that some of the sets were very, very small, and because of the chair, in the series, my feet were actually strapped down to footrests, because someone who was paralysed wouldn't have any feeling, so therefore their legs wouldn't stick out.
They'd just be floppy, wouldn't they? Rather than sticking out a bit.
My legs are in spasm all the time because of my disability, so the muscles just go like that all the time. So they had to put them in calipers, which are these things that go around your legs, and then they strapped them down onto the footrests, right? And so the chair was really bulky and really heavy, and I had to sort of lean back and push at the same time to balance it out. And because the door was so narrow, one of the doors was so narrow, I won't say which episode it was, but I just couldn't get through this door. And we had to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. But that was about it, really.
That was the extent which they just got the builders in, I suppose, to widen the doors.
It was just, yes, but then it's the thought process, isn't it?
Yes, it's actually thinking ahead that is going to be necessary.
That was going to be necessary, and all the way through through making the series, I was constantly advising people that the door handles were too high. If this person had actually lived in this house, there's no way that they would be. They would be altered for him, because this was his home.
In a way, Jessica's question follows on from that. Jessica.
Do you think disabled parts should always be given to disabled actors?
I think it's a very difficult question, but I think if the actor is right for the part is the most important thing. But I do think that disabled actors should be seen as well as able-bodied actors. And if they are right, and if they can actually act the part convincingly and very well, then there's no reason why they shouldn't. But if they're not right, then it should go to the best person for the job.
Exactly. I mean, the crux of the matter is it's whether you can act or not. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mark, thank you so much for coming to Going Live today.
Thank you.
What about it, Simon? We work together sometimes.
Yeah, I know. Plain policeman.
We deliberately cast him. We spent a long time thinking about it because one has to be responsible. We could easily have cast an actor to play disabled, but it wouldn't have had the reality. Plus, we looked at the disabled actors. We found one who could act, and that was the essential requirement. And we cast him in the role, and he's very good. His disability is not precisely the disability that we had in mind, but we have adapted to suit.
Obviously, by the fact that they've employed someone with a disability, it's a positive step in the right direction. And I hope one was employed on my acting ability rather than just my disability. But it's a case of only beginning to realise what's totally involved from the team I'm talking about when you actually are there doing it. Disability awareness is something that you can't just automatically think of.
And do you think that organisations like the BBC and theatres and film companies have any idea of the kind of difficulties that people like you face?
No, I don't. I really don't think that. And I only think they realise it once they've taken the initial step to cast somebody. And then they begin to realise. It's like realism doesn't end after the take's over, in my case. Realism is my life. It is getting there. I think the art movement as a whole, to begin with, was pretty slow, and then now it's beginning to open up more so than it was a couple of years ago. To the extent where people are aware a little bit more of what's going on in the arts. Through mainly, again, media and theatre and everything else. But I think it's important that what people see as disability art, if you like, deals with the right forms of issues, of getting jobs and work in mainstream, competing with the able-bodied society and the conflicts one has to go through to get the jobs on an equal footing, which is what it's all about. And until those barriers are broken down, what you just explained, we won't be taken in media or the arts or whatever form. We won't be seen as a strong enough voice. No.